My own brother and wife had an affair, leading to my family supporting them and criticizing me for revealing the truth. The people I trusted and loved the most turned out to be the ones who caused me the most devastation. When you enter into marriage, you never expect your closest loved ones to betray you in such a way. I had believed in marriage as a lifelong commitment and thought of family as a sacred and trustworthy place. It took me years to realize the ugly truth, but once I did, there was no going back. The betrayal was so dirty and grotesque that it felt like a cheap TV drama, one that I never imagined living through. With 17 years spent together with my wife, we had built a life with shared responsibilities, children, a home, and a comforting routine that suddenly felt suffocating in the face of this unfathomable deceit. I had grown accustomed to the stability in my life, finding comfort and even happiness in it. I believed that stability was a goal all adults should strive for. However, I began to notice small details that initially seemed insignificant to me. Phone calls abruptly ending when I entered the room, hushed laughter accompanying deleted messages, flimsy excuses for absences, and a palpable tension whenever my younger brother was mentioned. My brother, the charming one in the family who effortlessly captured everyone's attention. We had grown up together, sharing a room, secrets, and childhood battles. It never crossed my mind that he would be the one to betray me with my wife. Yet, it happened. Their illicit relationship was not a one-time mistake, but a deceitful and calculated affair aimed at humiliating me for years. Discovering the truth left me shaken. It was too late to salvage our once cherished relationship. A message finally awakened me to the truth. My wife inadvertently forwarded a voice note meant for someone else, wherein my brother expressed inappropriate feelings towards her, referring to her as his sister-in-law. The shock of hearing those words was like a physical blow, leaving me trembling and speechless with a mix of anger and disbelief. It took me hours to gather the courage to confront her, only to be met with a chilling denial that made me question who she truly was beneath the surface. Her dismissive response, "Are you imagining things?" felt like a betrayal in itself. With the first hint of the truth revealed, I became consumed by the need to uncover the entire story. In the following weeks, I silently dedicated myself to piecing together all the missing information to complete the puzzle. To gather evidence, I had trouble sleeping. I monitored her movements, copied her WhatsApp messages, installed software on the family computer to save temporary files, and even placed a hidden microphone in the study she often used in the afternoons. Finding what I sought wasn't difficult. Among explicit messages, conversations that seemed surreptitious, and audio recordings planning secret rendezvous, while she purportedly went shopping, I uncovered the truth. Yet what pained me most was how they spoke of me. They treated me like a bothersome fool who had to be kept in the dark while they played at being lovers in a forbidden romance. My brother would comment, "I don't know how he hasn't caught on yet." Clueless, she would respond, "He's so naive." Sometimes I considered telling him just to see his perfect husband facade crumble. That was the moment I realized it was no longer simply pain. It was a desire for justice. I needed to expose them. But I hesitated. I harbored this secret deep within me as they continued their game of deception. From my father, I learned at a young age that betrayals should never be ignored. If someone disrespects you, you don't respond with a smile. Instead, you deliver a strong rebuttal that stings. This belief led me to the decision that everything would culminate at dinner, a family dinner. I planned to invite everyone: my parents, my children, the nosy aunts, the gossipy cousins, and of course, the two main characters of this deceitful saga. I framed it as an effort to mend the family rifts caused by recent tensions. Promptly, my wife, the master of pretense, agreed to attend. My brother, relishing the spotlight, also welcomed the invitation. None of them suspected the true purpose of the gathering that evening. I meticulously set the table, prepared a special meal with the assistance of my children, and bought wine. In addition to the warm ambience, I'd also meticulously printed out evidence, every screenshot and message, ready to confront them all. Every photo, every conversation was meticulously recorded. I compiled the audio files into a single folder, mapping out a detailed chronology of each encounter. With all the evidence gathered, I was prepared to shatter the facade of deception in front of everyone, holding nothing back. Despite the betrayal I had endured, I clung to my right to speak out. It set the stage for what would become the most chaotic dinner of my life. In the upcoming update, I will delve into how the events unfolded, the reactions of my children, the actions of my parents, and the confrontation with my wife as she tried to silence me. Despite her attempts, that night, I held the reins of control. Update 1. A week later. The memories of that dinner are still vivid in my mind. I recall the precise moment when the mood shifted and joyful expressions faded into tension one by one. It became evident that this gathering was anything but ordinary. It was a night of confrontation and reckoning. The scene was set for a seemingly normal family dinner at our house. My wife wore her red dress, the one she used to wear when seeking my compliments. My mother prepared one of her desserts that we all pretended to enjoy out of tradition. My father assumed his role at the head of the table, attempting to maintain a sense of authority. The children appeared joyful to have the whole family together. And there sat my brother, the betrayer, with a silly grin as if nothing had happened, pretending to be a part of the family while consuming beer after beer. Little did they know I had orchestrated the evening with a calculated precision that surprised even myself, akin to that of a surgeon preparing for a delicate procedure. On multiple occasions, I silently listened to conversations while my children slept in the adjacent room. The atmosphere was tense for me during the initial 40 minutes, but to everyone else, it appeared normal. The topics ranged from politics to the sweltering heat, and the dog's recurring limp. I remained mostly silent, merely offering nods, pouring wine, and ensuring everyone was settled in their seats. I understood that rushing would ruin the intended impact, so I strived to create an environment of comfort and security, amplifying the forthcoming revelation. As the meal concluded and I began to clear the dishes, I seized the microphone from the Bluetooth speaker typically used for background music, connected it to my phone, and allowed the true host of the evening to take the stage. The pivotal moment stemmed from an audio clip, my brother's voice breathless with anticipation, jokingly expressing eagerness for his partner to don the black lace lingerie he had purchased. The explicit and disturbing nature of the conversation caused a commotion, leading one of my aunts to drop her glass in disbelief and mutter incredulously, "This has to be a joke." Yet it was far from a jest. As I observed their reactions, I saw a look on their faces that indicated a sudden realization of a shattered reality. My wife appeared pale, her mouth hanging open, while my brother simply lowered his gaze and fell into a deep silence, as though his very spirit had been torn away at that moment. When I finally spoke, it was not with raised voices or angry gestures, but with a chilling calmness that unsettled even myself. I revealed that I had been quietly gathering evidence for months, listening to every audio, reading every message, and witnessing the photos they exchanged. I recounted how she feigned illness to be with him at a roadside motel, fabricated work meetings while I cared for our children, and even during Christmas, when I was outside barbecuing with her father, she sent him a message from the bathroom saying, "I love you." My mother wept uncontrollably while my father stood up from the table and condemned my brother for bringing shame upon the family, noting that even at his lowest moments, he had never succumbed to such actions. Anything so disgusting. My children didn't quite understand, but they knew something serious was going on. My eldest son, barely 14 years old, looked at me with teary eyes and said softly, "Did she really do that?" And I didn't know what to answer. I just nodded, swallowing my rage so as not to destroy something in front of him. When my wife tried to get up from the chair to stop me, I put a folder on the table with all the screenshots. I threw them one by one like someone dealing cards in a poker game. "Do you want me to lie?" I said. "Do you want to keep pretending this didn't happen?" And then, looking her in the eyes, I let out what I had been repeating to myself for weeks like a mantra. "What hurts me the most is not that you betrayed me. It's that you allowed our children to grow up believing that this is love." The whole family was silent. Some were crying, others didn't know where to look, and I kept talking. I told them how I had felt, how I had broken inside, how hard it was for me to get up. In the mornings, I woke up beside a woman who was dreaming about another man sharing my last name. That night, I made it clear that my actions were not driven by revenge, but by a desire to expose the masks within our family. The silence that followed was heavy and palpable. A teenage nephew expressed his disappointment before storming out, while my brother's attempts to speak were shut down by our father. My wife sat silently, tears streaming down her face, seemingly realizing the turmoil she had caused. I calmly turned off the music and thanked everyone for coming, signaling that they were free to leave. 2 weeks later, the repercussions of that evening still lingered in the air. It still reverberates in every corner of my house, as if the walls themselves don't want to forget what was said, what was broken, what was revealed. I thought that by letting go of everything I had kept inside, I would feel something akin to peace. But the truth is that calm does not come after chaos. What comes as dust ruins consequences, and these sun consequences are not only felt, they are breathed. They are in the way my children look at me now, with that mixture of sadness, disbelief, and need for answers that I am still not able to give them. They are in the way my mother, with a trembling voice full of shame, called me the next day just to tell me that she couldn't believe that this was happening in her family. They are in the messages, the uncomfortable silences, the missed calls that I no longer return, because I don't want to keep explaining the inexplicable. My wife has not left the house. She has been living in the guest room since that night, like a silent shadow wandering aimlessly. She remains silent and unapologetic, making no effort to engage. Moving from the kitchen to the bathroom, then to the room, she avoids interaction with me, the children, or even the dog. When our kids question her presence and the strained relationships within the family, she resorts to feeble excuses, unable to meet their eyes. Caught in a moment of vulnerability, I'd overheard her tearful conversation on the phone recently, conveying regrets about how everything spiraled out of control and her disbelief at the extent of the situation. Blaming me for the turmoil as if speaking the truth was worse than her years of deception and betrayal with my own brother. Meanwhile, my brother has vanished, leaving us wondering whether shame, fear, or lack of courage propelled his disappearance. My father informed me that he had ousted him from the house abruptly. So when he went looking for comfort, he yelled at him. He said he was a disgrace and that he didn't dare set foot in the family home again after what he had done. I would love to say that gave me some satisfaction, but the truth is that all I felt was a bigger void. Because although I hate him with every fiber of my being, he's still my brother. And that, no matter how much it hurts, weighs on me like an anvil on my chest. One day, when my youngest son asked me why his uncle wasn't coming anymore, I had to make up an absurd story about him being on a trip. I had no idea how to explain to him that his own uncle had broken his family into 1,000 pieces. As for the rest of the family, the reactions have been a parade of hypocrisy, lukewarm solidarity, and judgments disguised as concern. My Aunt Angela, the one who always meddles in everything, called me to tell me that maybe it would have been better to handle it privately. Privately, as if it had been a minor misunderstanding, as if my heart had been shattered in silence. The problem was concealed and brushed off. I ended the call in silence, refusing to let others dictate how I should have reacted to the most painful betrayal in my life. My wife's cousin, the self-proclaimed wise one, sent me a lengthy message preaching about empathy, second chances, and the power of passion over logic. I nearly wanted to strike back through the phone and his simplistic philosophizing from a safe distance, devoid of the raw wound I was carrying. Despite the turmoil, there were glimmers of light. Some family members surprised me with unexpected sincerity. My cousin Laura, for instance, praised my courage, acknowledging the unspoken tension between them that nobody dared to voice until I did. Even my mother, though it was difficult for her, finally admitted noticing the strange behavior, but chose silence to avoid conflict. She embraced me, offering a small comfort amid the chaos, acknowledged me as she ought to. It was one of the few sincere gestures I've received lately. Despite its brevity, it felt like a breath of fresh air amidst the heavy smoke that surrounds me. Currently, my daily routine is a peculiar blend of emotional fatigue and mechanical movements. I'd rise early, prepare breakfasts solely for the children, escort them to school, and return to a home that no longer exudes the sense of belonging it once did. I worked from the dining room to evade the confines of the office where she once sat, composing messages to my brother. The silence weighs down on me, and tension lingers in every corner. Though unspoken, my children have transformed. Their eyes and actions betray the shifts within them. The elder communicates little, seemingly processing events gradually. The younger persistently wonders if mom will seclude herself indefinitely, if I will find a new partner, or if his uncle is now an outsider to our family. Regrettably, I lack answers to these inquiries, and the uncertainty gnaws at me deeply. To cope with the emotional turmoil of my upbringing, I sought therapy to navigate the complexities. It wasn't about expecting a miraculous fix, but more about preventing myself from unleashing pent-up frustrations indiscriminately. During my initial therapy session, the psychologist inquired about my objectives, prompting me to reflect on the underlying motives. I admitted to being unsure, but expressed a need to comprehend the circumstances leading to my current emotional state. How did someone I spent nearly 2 decades with deceive me so effortlessly? How could my own sibling betray me and then pretend everything was fine? The therapist offered a thoughtful response, explaining that betrayal isn't always rooted in malice, but can stem from personal vulnerabilities. While tempted to dismiss her insight, I recognized the value of exploring different perspectives. That excuse in the name of human complexity is one I've heard my whole life to justify unforgivable acts. The few friends who have found out have sent me words of encouragement, some even with silent admiration for my courage. But most have kept their distance, and I understand. Nobody wants to get involved in a family tragedy, especially when children are involved. Some feel uneasy, others guilty for not noticing anything. One colleague even admitted hearing a rumor about my brother and wife, but chose not to inform me out of respect. Respect my foot. In this tale, everyone knew something. Everyone suspected, yet no one spoke up for fear of igniting the conflict. I had to be the one to expose the truth for all to see. On a practical note, I've been taking some actions. I'm reassessing the accounts represent the financial transactions recorded by the bank. I suspect that my wife has not only emotionally betrayed me, but also engaged in unauthorized financial activities. I have come across suspicious transfers, inexplicable expenses, and deposits into an unfamiliar account. I am currently seeking legal counsel, and if the situation progresses towards a legal separation, I am determined not to be taken advantage of financially. If she believed she could betray me emotionally and then unlawfully take a portion of our assets, she is gravely mistaken. Furthermore, if I discover any involvement from my brother in the financial misconduct, I will not hesitate to take legal action against him, despite our familial ties. The term blood holds no significance when one is betrayed and left suffering in their wake. Witnessing the distress of my parents, particularly my father's evident difficulty in addressing the situation, is truly heartbreaking. It seems challenging for him to come to terms with the fact that one of his children has betrayed me, and the other. I took on the role of an executioner in the name of justice, while my mother advocated for forgiveness. She inundated me with audio recordings of religious reflections, self-help book quotes, and poems, insisting that holding on to hate would only harm me. Despite my earnest efforts to move on, it's challenging to release the inner turmoil that still lingers. It's hard to turn the page when the person responsible for my pain continues to roam freely in my own home, breathing the same air as me. The weight of my decisions from the past weighs heavily on me, chaining me down. Sometimes I question whether I did the right thing by shedding light on the truth so publicly. But then I recall the secretive exchanges, the knowing chuckles in the messages, and the hidden rendezvous that occurred while I innocently cared for the children. Every doubt fades away. My actions were fueled not by malice, but by the exhaustion of holding back. I stayed behind while the others left, taking the responsibility to clean up the mess. It was necessary to hold up a mirror to them and reveal their true selves, even if it meant breaking my family apart. I believe it's better to have a shattered family based on truth than a united one built on lies. Each passing day toughens me, making me less sentimental, less tolerant, and colder. I'm unsure if this transformation is positive or negative, but I know it's essential as the battle isn't over yet. The wounds are still fresh, and there's much unresolved between us. This won't conclude with a simple dinner and argument. It will continue until all the hidden truths emerge. I exposed their betrayal, but they haven't faced the consequences yet. The time for them to pay is coming. Now, 4 months later, the dust has settled, forming a thick scab of monotony and stale routine. Words that have been exhausted and are no longer spoken hide the continuing pain underneath the scab. The wound no longer bleeds as profusely, but it still throbs, a constant reminder that the story initiated by betrayal is far from over. Each throb serves as a prompt that those who inflicted harm must carry their burden of guilt without respite or evasion. The events that unfolded that fateful night at dinner were merely the beginning, setting the stage for a silent war that remains unseen by others. In this unseen battle, one must decide whether to rebuild from the broken pieces or to perpetuate destruction. I opted for the latter path. Initially, I delved into the financial records, scrutinizing every transaction and number in the bank statements. With the invaluable assistance of a friend skilled in forensic accounting, a resource I had not realized I required until now, we unearthed consistent small transfers to an account belonging to a certain Mauricio Key. This name, absent from our roster of contacts, appeared recurrently in the financial records. As I delved further into the expense records, I made a shocking discovery. It came to light that the records belonged to a shell company that my brother had set up more than 2 years ago under a pseudonym. What added another layer of betrayal was finding my wife's name as a signatory on at least 2 of the transactions. While the amounts were not astronomical, it became apparent that they had not only emotionally deceived me, but had also been deceitful by siphoning off money while I paid the bills, maintained the household, and believed we were a united team. The overwhelming mix of rage, disgust, and disappointment that consumed me in that moment was unimaginable. I had anticipated each new revelation to feel like I was experiencing the betrayal all over again, but this was different. This was beyond personal. It was a violation of trust on multiple levels: bed, pocket, time, effort, and the conversion of my hard-earned money into their shady endeavors. Armed with this damning evidence, I meticulously compiled all the information into a meticulously organized folder, sought legal counsel, and prepared to take the necessary steps forward. I began strategizing for a counterattack. This time there would be no shared dinner, no family gathered around. It would be a calculated, legal, and precise move. Through my lawyer, I notified my wife of my intent for a formal separation with supervised asset division and a thorough audit of our finances over the past 3 years. Her reaction upon reading the notification was one of disbelief, her face a mask of shock. She did not shed tears or raise her voice, but simply accused me of cruelty. I calmly retorted that this was about justice, and it would be upheld. Meanwhile, my brother found himself in legal trouble as well, receiving a formal summons for alleged tax fraud. His undisclosed income through a shell company was uncovered through diligent verification, prompting the tax authorities to launch an investigation. The unfolding events were far from what any of us had anticipated. To see him behind bars would be ideal, but for now, just making him go through the legal process, forcing him to spend money on a lawyer and deal with the stress of defending himself is satisfying enough. Meanwhile, there have been shifts in my children's situation. The oldest, who had previously kept his feelings bottled up, finally opened up. It happened one unexpected night while we were watching a movie. Without any preamble, he paused the film and expressed his frustration at feeling left out, hearing rumors at school, and feeling inadequate compared to his friends. I tried to be as honest as possible without being too harsh, explaining our family issues, including his mother's and uncle's betrayal, and my efforts to protect him and his brother during this chaotic time. He listened attentively, visibly upset, and then silently retreated to his room. The following day, he approached me and asked. I accompanied him to therapy, and along the way, he quietly thanked me for being honest. My inner circle now consists only of those who have remained loyal. The lukewarm ones who suggested I move on have drifted away like dry leaves. I have no need for them. I have no desire to prove myself to anyone. This phase is not about justifying or explaining. It's about purging. Anything that doesn't fit is discarded. My mother, who still relies on prayers and fate, finally acknowledged that she cannot condone what they did, but also doesn't want to witness her other son's downfall. I made it clear to her that it's not my concern, that everyone reaps what they sow, and if my brother must deal with the consequences, then let him do so without my assistance. Internally, I feel like a controlled time bomb, no longer exploding or breaking things. However, this doesn't mean I am at peace. It means I now think more, and every step I take is deliberate. That realization dawned on me that revenge does not always manifest through loud outbursts and public spectacles. It can also take the subtle form of a signed document, a carefully worded email, or a meticulously crafted court summons. Sometimes it boils down to refusing to forgive, refusing to forget, and refusing to extend second chances simply because of familial ties. Using the notion of family as an excuse to justify the unjust has lost its power in my house and my life. I cannot definitively say I am better, but I am certainly more aware. This newfound awareness feels like a victory amidst the turmoil, as I defied the expectation of being broken. Rather than crumbling in tears and seeking explanations on the floor, I emerged from that ordeal not broken, but hardened. Once a person toughens up, forgiveness becomes an alien concept, unaffected by love, lineage, or anything else. Fast forward 6 months since that pivotal night, and the man I used to be has completely vanished. It wasn't a swift, picturesque, fairy tale-like transformation painted in books. As if enduring agony served as a ceremonial cleansing of the spirit, the process was sluggish, excruciating, and mostly coerced yet unavoidable. The actions inflicted upon me not only stripped away my faith, my sense of safety, and my sanctuary, but also shattered the innocent belief that family always provided protection, that the utmost sacredness resided in one's own loyalty. When that pillar crumbled, every aspect of my existence trembled. I witnessed my life disintegrate piece by piece, yet somehow remained standing to gather the debris with hands soaked in blood. 2 months ago, my spouse, now my ex due to the finalized divorce, permanently vacated our home. Initially, she threatened to stay, to battle for custody to assert her entitlements. However, once her attorney outlined the repercussions, particularly after the exposure of evidence implicating her involvement in financial misconduct, she altered her stance. Realizing that continuing the conflict would lead to her defeat, she departed with a partly packed bag, without even bidding farewell. Children, she left me without a backward glance, leaving only a brief note in a handwriting I once knew intimately but now feels alien to me. The note expressed a hope for forgiveness, explained that things spiraled out of control, and admitted a lack of ability to cope. The words felt hollow, as though she had never written them, yet they lay before me on the table. My children observed her departure calmly. The youngest wept, questioning why she was leaving once more, while the eldest retreated to his room in silence for 2 days. Though difficult, it was not entirely unexpected. They both understood, each in their own way, that this was the culmination of a broken relationship. Since then, we have slowly pieced together a new life, establishing fresh routines, fostering healthier communication, and sharing more genuine dialogues. Each evening, the three of us come together for dinner, discussing school, projects, and their favorite shows. Though not everything is perfect. However, thankfully, masks are no longer required. Just that simple change makes me feel like I can finally breathe freely again, like coming up for air after months submerged underwater. Unfortunately, my brother's situation has taken a dark turn. He has become a sort of ghost, caught up in legal troubles due to the escalating tax issues with his fake company. There's a cloud of uncertainty hanging over him as investigations delve deeper into his affairs. He has since moved away and ended things with his girlfriend, whom he had deceived, much to everyone's surprise. The family has distanced themselves from him, with my parents gradually cutting off contact entirely. My mother is overcome with shame whenever she sees him, while my father has simply chosen to erase him from his life. During a rare moment of vulnerability over coffee on his balcony, my father confessed that he cannot make room in his life for someone he deems a coward. It was a piercing moment filled with disappointment and sadness that struck me deeper than any lecture. Through all this, I have learned some valuable lessons. In a journey I never expected to embark on, I've learned to decipher the hidden truths within bank statements, recognize emotional deception before it escalates to something physical, and navigate the complexities of parenting two children with a wounded heart while shielding them from my own pain. And most significantly, I've had to find a way to reclaim and preserve myself after enduring personal devastation. It wasn't just the actions of others that were challenging. It was how they reshaped me into someone I barely recognized, someone more detached, cautious, and strategic. While there are moments I yearn for the innocence of believing that love conquers all, I've come to accept and appreciate the strength and resilience that I've discovered within me. I've adapted to be more assertive, unwilling to be taken advantage of. It's a trait that has served me well in a world that can be ruthless. Recently, I bumped into a cousin I hadn't seen in ages. She embraced me with a warmth that belied our time apart and recounted how my actions on a particular night had left a lasting impact on those around me. Many still marvel at the strength I displayed. To her and to many curious onlookers, I simply echo what I've shared countless times before. I'm so in therapy that it already comes out automatically, because if I didn't do it, I would rot inside. It's not about having one. There are no winners in a story like this. It's about not having allowed myself to be completely destroyed, about having spoken when the easiest thing would have been to remain silent, about having exposed what many prefer to hide so as not to cause discomfort. And yes, it was cruel. It was brutal, but it was necessary. If I hadn't done it, they would have continued laughing behind my back, and I wasn't going to allow that. Today I sleep alone, but in peace. The house is silent, but not tense. The children are growing, adapting, healing, and I'm still here rebuilding myself day by day, piece by piece. I no longer expect apologies. I no longer expect divine justice. It's enough for me to know that they, both of them, are going to have to live with the guilt, with the look of their children when they discover the whole truth, with the distance of a family that no longer trusts them, and with the certainty that the man perceived as weak, the one assumed to crumble in silence, turned out to be the individual who confronted them with the consequences of their actions. This marks the conclusion of my narrative, not with a traditional happy resolution, but with a just one. Revenge was not the conclusion, but rather the genesis of something far more significant: my liberation. To anyone reading this, particularly those who have encountered comparable challenges or fear facing them in the future, remember this. If someone professes love while disrespecting you, to not simply tolerate it. Instead, stand up for yourself, take action, and continue moving forward.